There seems to be a strong undercurrent of anti-male devtas, anti-Vaishnav, anti-Shaiv in the Shakt depictions. Kali standing on Shiva, goddess seated on a chair with four legs on four male deities, etc. But this is not present in the Vaishnav or Shaiv traditions. Could you explain?
Okay, so first of all, in any of the sampradayas within dharma, whether it is a Vaishnava sampradaya or a Shaiva sampradaya or anything, the primary basic idea, and I suppose most of us are aware of this, is that there is one single deity, one tattva, let's call it deity and a tattva, which is the highest supreme, and everybody else is but a manifestation of that. So if you are looking from a Shaiva point of view, if you read that text, Shiva is the highest, everybody else is but a manifestation from that. If you read the Vaishnava text, it's always Vishnu who is at the top, and then there are other deities who come later on, who is a projection from that. So the same concept is even there in Shakta Tantra. There is no harm in this, because it's believed that whenever an upasaka traverses a specific path, he or she must look at his Ishtha Devata, whether it's a Devata or a Devi or whichever form, as the supreme, as the ultimate, and the absolute form, and everything else is but a projection of that. It is only when you look at it that way that you have a chance of actually progressing. Now, when it comes to the depictions, specific depictions like Kali standing on Shiva, or where you have Lalita Tripur Sundari standing, she's sitting on a lotus that emanates from the navel of Shiva and on a throne which is carried by four deities. So these are representations of specific principles in Shakta Tantra. So Kali is an extremely ferocious form of the Divine Mother. It's well known to everybody, and that basic idea we all have. To integrate her upasana and her power into the mind and body of the upasaka, one will need a platform, a base. You call it the adhara. The mind and the body has to be very, very stable. It is that representation which is shown that it is only when she steps on Shiva that she suddenly stops. The tremendous amount of power that she has is, there is some amount of control in that power. Otherwise, it's not enough to just worship a deity. You have to progress with the deity. I mean, there is no point to worship Kali if you're scared of her. And you can't take the kind of terrifying power that she personifies. Whereas in the case of Lalita Tripur Sundari, it is the diagram that we see, the picture that we see, is a representation of the tattvas in the Shaiva system that used to be there, of the 36 tattvas, which is, first there is Parashakti, and then below Parashakti there will be Sadashiva tattva. Mind you, these are not just deities, these are tattvas, which means that they represent a certain state of being which an upasaka can, a tremendous upasaka, I'm saying not an ordinary one, perhaps somebody of the caliber of a rishi or something like that, can experience while being still alive. So there is Sadashiva, below Sadashiva there is Ishvara Tattva. Ishvara Tattva is basically, you'll see that the throne is carried by Ishvara, then there is Brahma, Vishnu, Rudra. So these are all considered, each of them are considered as Ishwaras. They have the power of Ishvara. Now, going more details into that would entail explaining the 36 tattvas of Kashmiri Shaivism, from which this depiction is taken, basically. So the idea is, first principle, first thing you have to remember is that every system within Dharma considers their deity as the supreme. And there is nothing wrong in that, because Vaishnavas do that, Shaivas do that, Shaktas also do that. And these two specific depictions are basically representations of how gradations of tattvas. Tattvas are basically the creative elements that have formed the universe. The theology, you can call it, or the way in which we, the Shaktas, perceive the world. That there is Parashakti, from there, it comes down to Sadashiva level. From Sadashiva, there is Ishvara. Beyond Ishvara, there will be known as the Shuddha Tattvas, which are basically all the mantras that we chant. They have a life of their own. They are like deities in themselves. Below the mantras, there will be Maya and various other things. Like there are 36 gradations. So we take only the first top 5 of those tattvas. All of them are very powerful, very excellent, each of them. But there is a slight nuanced difference in them. And on the very top of those system of tattvas sits Parashakti, which is Lalita Tripur Sundari. So this is represented in the diagram.
Nowadays, many traditions don't do the full mantra Purush Charana for each deity. Example, after Ganpati mantra, 1 lakh Ganpati mantra is done, you move on to 3 lakh Bal mantra, etc., etc., progressing to Shri Yantra worship. Does this give any results, or is there a reason for this?
Uh, yeah, there are many traditions where the full, all the limbs of the Purush Charana of, say, Ganapati is not done. I don't think it is that much of a problem because on the first, you have to understand that what exactly is the aim of the Upasaka in this progression. If you follow this, the worship of Ganapati is basically to remove. So, if you're in the path of worshipping Lalita Tripur Sundari through the method of Sri Vidya Upasana, and it is an excellent method, few deities are very important to appease so that your path becomes clearer. First, it starts with Ganapati, then there will be, of course, the blessings of the Guru is important, then Vatuka Bhairava is important, these things. So, worship of the Ganapati mantra basically allows certain kind of blockages to be removed from your life so that you can progress to the Upasana of Lalita Tripur Sundari. So this is not exactly a problem. The Guru can determine. Sometimes the Guru may also say that suppose if in his or her judgment he feels that a certain Upasaka needs to complete the full angas of the mantra Purush Charan of Ganapati, then he will tell that you finish the japa, you do homas, etc. It does not. Yes, if somebody asks this question that if I just do 1 lakh japa of Ganapati, does it give me mantra siddhi of Ganapati? Perhaps not. Perhaps, but then mantra siddhi is a vast topic. It's not that easy. In any case, among all the practitioners, perhaps 5 to 10% actually attain to the state where they attain a siddhi of a deity, whether it's Ganapati or whether it's any form of the Tripur Sundari mantras and their kramas, etc. So as such, I don't see it much of a problem. But yes, if your focus is on Ganapati specifically, then you will have to complete all the limbs. At least you have to do the homas and you have to do the tarpana and including tarpana is extremely important for Ganapati and including also feeding people bhojana. So only then you have a chance of actually mastering completely the worship of Ganapati in the tantric method. But that is if Ganapati is your final aim. Sometimes a guru may decide that no, this is fine. So this I believe is a decent enough practice, and it should be left to the judgment of the guru to decide.
What is the difference of a mantra Purush Charana of Devi for a sadhak and the daily puja, abhishek, Sahasranama chanting and vrat for her as a bhakt?
So this is a very good question because this understanding this explains to you why the tantric path is slightly different from the other paths of Devi Upasana. So it is extremely possible to do Upasana of the goddess through Pauranika methods, through bhakti, through fasting, through vratas, which we see in North India being done quite extensively during the time of the Navratras. That is one way. There is no harm in that. The tantric method is more technically precise. So the aim is to be clear. You enter into the field of tantric upasana when you want. Let's be clear. The word used is siddhi, which basically means accomplishment. Complete perfection in the mantra when you want. Complete perfection in the upasana of the deity, so that eventually, whenever you use that specific mantra, that specific whatever sadhana you're doing, and sadhana means sadhana of the mantra. You're doing it's kind of a seva you're doing to the mantra. Only then you have to follow the full method of Purush and not just once. You may have to do Purush multiple times because in Kali Yuga, the texts tell you, the tantras tell you that because of the vast amount of corruption, at least four number of times Purush has to be done than what is mentioned in texts, which means suppose a mantra is can be finished, the Purush count is 1 lakh, then you'll have to do at least 4 lakhs in this age. And you may have to do it in different places, at home once, sometimes wherever your guru lives in front of your guru, sometimes in a cow shed, sometimes in a hill, sometimes in different places. Each of the time you do the mantra is purifying yourself, purifying, removing certain karmas, certain blockages that you have in your mind, so that a time comes when you attain complete what is known as mantra chaitanya, which is absolute. Your consciousness becomes one with the mantra. And then whenever you use that mantra, under whatever circumstance, whichever place of the world, anywhere, immediately the potency inside the mantra, the Shakti encoded in the mantra will start working, and some of the other results will follow. This is the difference between if you worship with normal bhakti and vrata, where so there is no harm in that. Only thing is that it is not a guaranteed result. It's not a process where you are guaranteed to have a result. So it leaves things to the discretion of the deity, which is fine if that's your approach. The tantric system is slightly different. It's more technical. It says that no, I will continue till the point where there is an absolute union with the deity. So that every time I invoke the deity, and invoking the deity means invoking the mantra of the deity, immediately the deity will come to you, either will show some signs or will interact with you in some way or the other. And consequently, there will be some signs in the external world itself. So this is the primary difference between the tantric way of approaching Shakti Upasana, whereas the normal, the standard way which we find, which is through, either through bhakti or through fastings, vratas, or some chanting of Shastranamas and things like that.
Can a sadhak's Shakti be removed or taken away by another of a much higher caliber? If so, what can be done to prevent this?
Yes, definitely it can be taken away. And there are examples of this we find. In fact, one of the best examples of this we find in the biography of Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, where we find that there was one tantric who was a Kali Upasaka and very, very extremely powerful and high caliber tantric. So he had come to meet Ramakrishna at the temple in Dakshineshwar, and he used to perform a homa on the palm of his right hand to Kali, and he had this specific ability, Siddhi, that whenever he used to enter into a debate or shastrartha on any topic, he would never ever lose. Before he starts, there's a specific sound he would make that was sort of an invocation to the deity, and then after that, it was impossible to defeat him in an argument. So he was renowned in that area. The text says that the moment he enters into the temple complex, Ramakrishna was sitting. He just looks at him, and that very specific word, the very specific term that he uses to invoke the deity, that tantric, Ramakrishna utters that term very, very loudly. And immediately he sees that, Upasaka sees that he has lost his voice. So he's not able to speak even. And basically what has happened is whatever power he had was drawn out by Ramakrishna and taken into within himself. This was possible because Ramakrishna was a much high caliber Upasaka than him. Eventually that person comes back to Ramakrishna and then, takes sannyas and says that he wants to leave society and do more sadhana. Ramakrishna says, go ahead. So it is definitely possible to take away the Shakti of an individual by somebody who is obviously has a higher power. There has to be a sufficient amount of sort of, for lack of better words, a gap between the amount of Shakti that somebody has and the person who is taking it away. There is always some consequence to this, of course, because nobody likes to give Shakti on their own. It's like if you're forcibly taking it off, there will be something, a karmic consequence, for example. Perhaps in some lifetime, in this example, somebody of the caliber of Ramakrishna, he may again help that individual out with giving back some amount of Shakti. In some lifetime, this is a balance that will happen. To prevent that, on the other hand, there are certain cases where one may forcibly take away some power, some Shakti from an individual through negative means. That is also possible that actually unfortunately happens quite often. So in order to protect oneself, there are various methods, various sadhanas, specifics. I won't go into the details of that, but if you have a good guru, he or she can guide you into what needs to be done. But it's definitely possible.
How does one know one is progressing in sadhana or even on the right track for them?
This is a broad question because it depends on what sadhana you're doing. So I'm considering in this, pertaining to the topic, I'll only deal with mantra sadhana and that which involves tantric upasana, etc. I will not go into the yogic sadhana and other things. So if you are doing hatha yoga or kriya yoga, that's a different mechanism for that. I won't go into that because the topic does not pertain to that. So if you're doing mantra sadhana, the simplest way to find out if you're actually progressing is that how keenly do you look forward to the time when you can sit for japa again? Does it cause a sensation inside you? Is there something, whether you can define it properly or not, you'll feel a tremendous amount of love for what you're doing. It's like throughout the day, you'll keep waiting that when can I again sit back and start the japa? And there will be certain inner experiences, a certain state of happiness, let's call it that way, or something not always happiness. There are some mantras of deities that may give you a sense of power, that may give you a sense of detachment, that may cause certain experiences, etc. Either way, the bottom line is that if your mantra sadhana is working, you look forward to it. It will not look like a drag. There are people who keep doing a lot of sadhanas, but it's more like, they sit and it's as if somebody has given them a punishment that, I have to complete 1 ghanta baithna hai, fir jana. If that's the attitude, then it's not working anyway. Then, even then you can progress. It will take a lot of time. But the key sign of progress in using mantras and things like that is that you look forward to it. and you do not have to make an extra effort to be disciplined. It's not like you are in school and class and your teacher is saying you should be silently following all the rules, and why are you not concentrating, etc. Apne aap se aayega. It will come from within you that okay, I need to sit down every day because I feel good about it. Something is it something is there that is pulling you throughout the day. Whatever you might be doing, you may be in office or you may be doing something else. But back of your mind, there's something that um, it's like you wait for the time when can you again sit. So if that is happening at the initial stages at least, then you know that whatever you're doing is at the right track, and keep carrying on with it. Eventually it, and again, when I say eventually, it doesn't mean 10 days, 15 days. Sometimes, in fact, the ideal state in my opinion is if you pick up a practice and it's working for you, you need to continue it for 3 to 4 years before it shows some serious development, because these things are not easy, and people spend decades and decades practicing, in fact lifetimes, before you can go into higher states. So like that.
Sir, can you please elaborate on Amnaya systems of Shaktism and their Devis like Kubijka and Tripura, etc.? What is Amnaya actually?
As we were discussing last time also, so the basic idea is that all the mantras that are there present in the universe that have been given, and there are 7 crore mantras. Each one of them have come out from one of the faces of Lord Shiva. So Shiva has 5 different faces, 4 horizontal faces, east, west, north, south, and one on top, which is looks upward. So these faces, each of them, from each of them emanates a certain kind of vidya, a certain kind of knowledge, a certain mantra. Mantra means the deity, and along with the mantra, there is the process of upasana of that mantra, how you should approach the deity, etc., etc. So each of these are known as the amnayas. From each of these, there is one set of tantras that have come out. So at the initial stages, perhaps when during the time when Kashmiri Shaivism was at its peak, then each of the amnayas had, for example, in the southern face of Shiva, the Aghora face, there used to be the amnaya from which Bhairava Tantras came out, things like that, etc. So this system was also adopted in the pure Shakta systems that came in after about 10th, 11th century, where it's believed that there is Shiva and there are the 5 amnayas through which there are 5 emanations of mantras that are coming out, and the 4 horizontal ones, and the one on the top, which is known as the Urdhva Amnaya, the one on top. And beyond that also, there is one more amnaya. There are some sampradayas which give initiation to that. It's known as the Anuttara amnaya. The Anuttara means that which cannot be surpassed. So that face of Shiva is not visible. It's like a face that is made of very subtle light. And there is also another amnaya, which is known as the Adho amnaya, which is again not visible, but a face of Shiva that looks downward. And each of these have a certain class of mantras. For example, the Adho amnaya has mantras which may pertain to spirits, which may pertain to other things, lower category of beings than deities. Whereas the Urdhamnaya mantras are of a different nature. So you go into upasana of the Urdhamnaya mantras only when you have attained to a certain degree of detachment and certain progress in the sadhana. And another way of looking at amnaya is that suppose you are worshipping Kali, so each of the amnayas will have some mantras of Kali that were revealed by Shiva, and each of these have their own processes through which you approach Kali upasana. So what a guru does is that he or she may teach you, because in Tantra, women can be gurus. There's no problem in that. We have historical evidence, and even today there are. So if you are approaching Kali, the guru may teach you, okay, let's start with Purvamaya mantras of Kali. Once you attain to a certain degree of proficiency, the guru may say, okay, let's go to Uttaramnaya mantras like this. So you can approach the deity through multiple amnayas, and then there is the Urdhamnaya, which is the higher category of mantra of Kali, and the deity and the guru may tell you, okay, this specific mantra is an Urdhamnaya mantra. Urdhamnaya mantras, when you start doing upasana, then you have to be careful, because those are highly spiritual mantras. You cannot expect material results from them. So you have to be very detached. Suppose you have your consciousness as a lot of material expectations, and you start doing an Uddhamna mantra on your own, then it may cause certain disturbances in your life. So that is why there are these categorizations done in the systems. And there are specific Amnaya Dikshas that are given, which comes at a much later stage, at least in the Kalikula. Amnaya Dikshas are pretty end of the line for tantric progression. So this is the concept of the amnayas. So basically, you are trying to approach the deity. The deity is, say, sitting inside, and there are there are different doors. You can enter through each of the amnas and you reach the same deity. But each door has a different set of mantras, a different set of procedures, and accordingly, there will be a different set of experiences that you may have. And then eventually, there's the Urdhva, which is the more spiritual phase. And beyond the Urdhva, there is the Anuttara, which is absolutely when the consciousness of the Upasaka has become non-dual with the deity, which means that he is as good as he has become Kali himself in his sadhana. Then you go into the Anuttara systems and all that. So this is basically the idea of the Amnas. And the deities that he mentioned, so Kubjika, Tripur Sundari, so these are primary deities of Amnas. While I gave the example of Kali, it can be for any deity. Whereas, say for Kubjika, for example, she is known as the supreme deity of the Paschimamnaya. So Paschimamnaya, there are a set of mantras, set of upasanas that are given by Shiva. And yes, Sampradayas sometimes have slight differences in the way they understand the system, the corpus of mantras that are pertaining to each amnaya. So in the Paschimamnaya system, the chief deity is Kubjika. Along with that, there will be many auxiliary mantras, many auxiliary forms. So this is how the amnaya system works in Tantra.
What are your views on the Kinnaram Baba Sant Parampara?
Okay. So that is one of the most authentic Aughar Sampradayas present in India today. Perhaps I don't know whether there are any other Sampradaya as good as that, as authentic. Maybe there are, I'm not aware, but that is definitely one of the best Aughar Sampradayas. But you have to understand that while what is known as Aughar or Aghorias or things like that, that is an extreme form, that is one specific form of practice, and they have their own systems of upasana, etc., etc. It is perhaps, one may look at it, the Kapalika component of the upasana is more higher in their systems than in the pure tantric systems. So there is slight technical difference, but otherwise, since the question pertains to whether the Kinnaram ashram is authentic, it's absolutely one of the best in India. They have produced, let's put it this way, they have produced a streamline of fantastic siddhas, and they still keep producing that. So there is no question about the caliber of people associated with that sampradaya or the gurus that have come up in that sampradaya. So it's one of the most respected across North India.
What are the prerequisites before starting Tantra sadhana, and what kind of person would be the ideal candidate?
That depends on, first, the only prerequisite in my view is that you must have a desire for it. If it attracts you, if you feel that, okay, this is perhaps the right path for me, then some of the other form of tantric upasana can definitely be done. It's not necessary that, remember that just because somebody enters into the field of tantra, he will have mastered every single tantric mantra and process and deity. No, it doesn't work that way. That is why the guru can customize. While there are broad methods in which you progress, there are certain customizations which the guru can give and tell that, okay, for this person, this specific method of upasana is more suitable. For that person, that deity is more suitable, like that. So by and large, there is something for everybody in tantra, but you enter into this field only when you are you do not have inhibitions and you feel an attraction for it. Because if you are into a Kola Sampradaya, or if you are into a Kali Kula Sampradaya, definitely after the Purnabhishek Diksha and other things, you will have elements in Upasana which are completely heterodox, which are different from the standard conception of Upasana that we have. So you can offer alcohol to deities, you can offer meat to deities, or you can offer anukalpas, which are substitutes for these. But remember, the reason why a substitute is used is because Tantra accepts that there are certain specific ingredients which, when passed through a certain ritual process and offered to a deity, then they become acceptable to the deity. So if you have inhibitions about this right at the beginning, then obviously Tantra is perhaps not your path. Or maybe you can, remain, you can confine yourself to what those sampradayas which are entirely into the Dakshinachara method of Tantra, which is present today, where these things are not involved. But either way, Tantra is, you must have a desire for it. Number two, there's a technical precision in the path. So that is important. It's not necessarily that I just have bhakti on the deity, fir wo chal jayega. Aisa nahi hota hai. You have to follow the process in which the guru tells you, and you have to do the sadhana like that. Only then you have a scope of progressing in this path. Additionally, if there are people who are more, how do I put it? A certain lesser degree, and I'm specifically talking about Kali Kula Upasana specifically, which the Virachara sadhanas and all that come in later on. A little lack of fear and things like that are helpful eventually. Let's just put it that way. Some degree of control, some a more goal-oriented way of doing sadhana. If that is what you like, then perhaps tantra is more suited. And apart from that, even from Jyotish, one can, if you look at the horoscope of an individual, you can get a fair idea that whether he or she can progress in the tantric upasana methods or whether the Vedic systems of sadhana are more suitable for the individual. So that way.
Can we have any of the Mahavidyas as our Ishta Devtas or Devis?
Oh, absolutely. There are so many people in the tantric path who have the Mahavidyas as the Ishta Devata. There is no problem in that. But Ishta Devata, you have to understand, you truly understand your Ishta Devata when you have a complete experience of the deity. Otherwise, it's just a mental idea that, okay, I like this deity. It's the same thing as somebody saying that I like that film star. The film star doesn't know you to exist or not. So only this process works when there's a two-way communication. And in order to build the two-way communication, you have to go through an intense process of upasana. So that is where this clarity must be there, that the Ishtadevata really works. So the concept of Ishtadevata will become a living reality only when you pass through the process of sadhana.
There is a belief in many people that after you choose Tantra as your spiritual path, you won't get moksha and you'll keep wandering in this world. How true is this?
This is complete nonsense. And you don't have to even quote scriptures for this. Some of the people who have gone to the highest levels of tantric upasana, for example, if we look at Bengal, siddhas like Bama Kappa, who was considered as a Tara upasaka of highest caliber, so high that people from all over used to come and ask spiritual guidance or other things. Somebody like Ramakrishna Paramahamsa actually performed all the 64 tantric upasanas under a guru, female guru, Bhairavi Brahmani, and attained to the success of these sadhanas. There are innumerable examples of great siddhas and powerful men and women who have used this path to attain to the highest states of spirituality. So the question of you will not attain moksha, this is absolute nonsense. You will attain to very high states of spirituality. In fact, there are gradations of the high states. Depends on the caliber of the upasaka, how long it takes, and things like that. So that is obviously completely a wrong notion.
It is said that Tantra is a secret and it should not be talked about in public. In today's world, when people are just limited to symbolism and don't really go deeper to get real benefits of the practices, don't you think Tantra should be more talked about so that more people from our side get into Shakta Parampara and gain benefit which can be of help to us and to the society as a whole?
I agree with this idea completely. So, by and large, for many centuries, Tantra was practiced with the key idea of secrecy and I understand the necessity of secrecy. In fact, anybody will understand the necessity of secrecy once you start doing proper upasana, because there are certain things, if you reveal them, uh, your sadhana takes a hit. So you will fall a little bit because of not keeping certain things secret. And I'm not talking about the esoteric, the heterodox elements. I'm saying even a thing as simple as the mantra you are chanting. If it has attained to some degree of power and you make it public, immediately the power will leave. You will feel it the very next day that your mantra is not working anymore as it used to work if you open up and tell people. That being said, there are certain other aspects of Tantra which I think it's time to explain to people, remove the misconceptions, and tell them that this is a fantastic path that works. And if we go by the dictums that Lord Shiva gives in the Tantras, then he, in fact, sort of says that as Kali Yuga progresses, Tantra will perhaps be the most prolific, the most extensive method of upasana that people will follow because it is absolutely suited for this age. That is why the revelation was given that in this age, people by and large are unfit to follow the core Vedic methods of sadhana because there is a huge amount of corruption of the gunas and things like that. That is why the tantric methods were given, which takes the same spiritual aim but reformulates it through new ritual language, new way of approaching the deities. That's what it is. And the other problem is that in the last at least 20-30 years, I've seen because the texts are more widely available, unlike say 100 years ago when very few people used to have actually texts with them. And so there are a lot of people who are sort of scholars or whatever you call them. They'll just read the text and then on their own they'll formulate some ideas and things like that, which may or may not be correct at all, which is not the way that the Upasaka looks at the text. Upasaka understands the meaning of the text. And then they go into creating their own sort of new mythology about Tantra, and they find it exciting to bring out certain aspects which basically confirms their own biases rather than a clear objective understanding of why those processes were included. So perhaps it is time to at least some aspects of the tantra may not be uh, there are say 20, 25 to 30% which should only be learned from a good guru and should not be read randomly or discussed with any random person, because you'll very likely misunderstand them unless your body and mind has attained to a certain level. But there are many other aspects of tantra which can definitely be talked about in public, and perhaps it should be, because otherwise our systems will be taken over by people who have only a passing interest, who are more interested in judging these systems than actually using it for the intended purpose for which it was given.
If one were to take a year to prepare oneself before approaching a guru to seek initiation into the Shaktipat, which of the following Mahavidyas is ideal to approach for a beginner, and what would be the best way to prepare during this 1 year?
Okay, first of all, when we say Mahavidya, if there is a Mahavidya that you really like, suppose for some reason you like Kali or you like Tripur Sundari, and many are on an average other people I've seen most of them. Most people generally like Kali, Tara, or Tripur Sundari. These are the three most prominent. The other deities are only perhaps if somebody had introduced you to those deities, then you will like the other Mahavidyas by and large. So before you approach a guru, proper upasana of a Mahavidya only you can learn after your guru tells you. You cannot learn on your own. That is, there are methods, there are processes. Then you have to do certain sadhanas and things like that. But as I had mentioned last time, there is no bar to actually reciting the names of a deity. If you think that you can handle your worship of Kali is appropriate for you, and there is no problem with that. And I say that because I know at least one specific case where somebody had suggested Kali Upasana to a lady who was very mild natured, and perhaps it was not the right deity, and quite easily she got scared after some experiences happened. So if those are basic understanding, basic judgments that each individual can make on their own. Suppose you feel that you are accustomed to a certain degree of familiarity with the idea of Kali and you really like her, then you can pick up the 108 names of Ashtottara Nama and keep doing that sufficiently. Sufficient means not just doing it once. You should spend at least 45 minutes to an hour daily with that, with devotion, nothing else, no complications, no mantra chanting, nothing. Along with that, there are certain basic stotra slokas related to the idea, concept of a Guru Tattva. If you keep doing that and you have some patience, that is very likely that you will be introduced to somebody or the other who can take you higher in the path of Kali Upasana. But which specific Mahavidya, it is not one or this or that. It depends on the individual. You cannot make a thumb rule that only you should start with this Mahavidya, that Mahavidya. If there is somebody who likes Tripur Sundari, then perhaps you can approach people who are more knowledgeable and find out certain Ashtottara Namas, uh, not the main one, but there are some processes, some stotras, etc., related to Lalita Tripur Sundari, and you keep chanting that along with you do, chanting of the basic slokas with respect to the concept of the Guru, the Guru Tattva, and spend some time. Keep doing this upasana at least for a year and a half, because remember that there is another factor for progress, that is time. When your time is right, only then you get the things. But that doesn't mean that you do not practice before that, because if you do not practice, then even if the time is right, you may still miss the opportunity. So, like that.
How to prepare Adhara to retain, digest the Shakti generated during sadhana?
This is basically, again, this is something that ideally the guru should tell the individual, because each individual has his or her own mind and body, mental makeup and physical features, etc. Those if a guru is really competent, he or she can just look at an individual once and figure out that what are the areas where this individual will progress certain aspects of sadhana. He or she can progress faster in certain aspects where he or she will have difficulty. So accordingly, practice can be tailored for the individual, that if you do this, if you follow this, then there's a high chance that you will progress. And about retaining Shakti inside the body and mind, the first principle is discipline. That you have to follow whatever you're doing, do it in as disciplined a manner as possible. And once you start experiencing, you have to also ensure that the circle of people you surround yourself with, you discuss, you move about with, that changes to a circle that is more conducive for your sadhana. So, basic understanding you have to, basic thing you have to understand that the moment a new power, new shakti is infused into your mind and body through the upasana of the mantras that you're doing, it is going to cause certain changes. So the patterns that you had, the people you moved around with, your friend circle, and things like that, that will always get disrupted. If there is no change that is happening in your life, in spite of doing a lot of sadhana, that means your mantra is still not activated properly. Because if you were already perfect, assuming mantra is like a rope, it's going to pull you up, rope that you hang on to, and the rope by itself keeps pulling you up into the higher states of upasana. So the moment your energy level changes to a more subtle state, then what was happening beforehand with you, the circles you were moving around, the things you like, that is automatically bound to change. That is like a given. It will happen, definitely happen. Whether it happens on day one or whether after 20 years of upasana, that depends on the individual. Once that happens, then there is a natural reconfiguration of your life that will happen. So basic idea is that as you keep doing sadhana, you'll see that there are people who will fall off from this circle. There may be new people who you'll find as more conducive, etc. So these are things that are being sort of, to put it that way, orchestrated by the power of the sadhana that you're doing, whether you consciously understand it or not. So in that case, these things actually are aligned in a way so that you can retain more of the shakti inside your mind and body, so that you go higher. Retaining shakti is a very difficult thing because mistakes are very easy to make. Slightest mistake and everything that you do is going to go down again, and you have to start again building up the power. So whom you speak to, whom you hang out with, what kind of discipline you follow, those things all add up little by little to help you attain and gather, retain the amount of shakti that is needed to move up to the higher notches of sadhana.
Can non-initiates worship Ugra forms of Devi like Kali, Bhairavi using Ashtotaras and Stotams?
Yes, definitely. There is no problem. But before that, it is good to at least ask somebody, because don't just start a Ugra form of a deity, say something which is not common. And suppose you pick up the Ashtatara Nama of somebody, some form like Chinnamasta, and keep doing it very aggressively. There is some effect that will start. Question is, will you be able to handle it or not? So, in order that you get the right guidance, even if you don't have an initiation, it is always good to speak to somebody who is more knowledgeable. And if that individual thinks that okay, it's fine for you, you can. There is by default, reading stotras etc. do not require initiation per se, but still it is advisable that at least speak to somebody, because suddenly you start something very offbeat like this and you intensify your sadhana, you may get certain effects. Then how are you going to handle those effects? Those are important things.
What are your thoughts on Aghor Tantra, Shamshan Upasana, Munda Sadhana?
Uh, so, Aghora is a specific path that has overlapped, technically speaking, overlaps a lot with tantric upasana. And then there are other methods and things they use, which is more specific to sampradaya. So Aghora by itself, you cannot say, at least that's what I found, you cannot say that there is XYZ, these scriptures where every detail of sadhana is mentioned. The tantras definitely, the tantric paths definitely have full documentation of all the methods that are followed. So this you do, this sadhana you do, this amount of homa, etc. So Aghora by itself takes bit from there, and then there are various, how would I put it, organic methods of sadhana that were evolved in the sampradayas, which are passed down from guru to shishya, which may or may not have a clear recording in texts. So Aghora, there is an overlap, but it is slightly different also. On the other hand, in the tantric system, specifically in Kalikula Upasana, there is the stage which is known as the Virachara. Virachara is the stage where you, suppose somebody who is capable, the guru will ask that individual to perform certain sadhanas that involves elements of cremation ground, even, ritually sanctified skulls are used and things like that. So there's nothing wrong in it. It's, if it's capable, if somebody is capable and the guru thinks that he can do it, so he'll do it. There are many people even today who do those sadhanas, but remember that these are also very risky. these sadhanas. So do not just randomly, you chant some mantras for a few years and think of yourself as somebody very super great, and on your own you start going here and there and doing these things. You are very likely to fall into trouble, because the moment you enter into a cremation ground, and those processes, those any element related to cremation ground has its own peculiar energy, which is very, very fast, very intense, equally dangerous. So even if you enter into those zones without knowing exactly what you're doing, how to protect yourself, on what are the various things, elements involved in this, how to handle those, which are the kind of deities you can worship, and before you go into the worship, what are the other prerequisites. If those are not set into place, you are very likely to get into trouble, because the cremation ground route is 100% problematic for somebody who does not know what he's doing. There is no no second opinion about it. I mean, you may or may not finally get to see Kali, but suppose tomorrow you just end up in a cremation ground for 10-15 days and doing whatever you think, even with your bhakti also you sit down, some effect will come, and most likely it will be an effect you will be unlikely to be able to handle properly. So that is why there are these checks and balances. Only when a certain level of diksha is attained, the guru then tells you the processes, teaches you, and if the guru thinks that you are fit to do that upasana, then the guru will tell you, okay, now you go, you have to do this. These are the mantras you have to do beforehand. This is the kind of day on which you have to go. These are the specific ingredients you need for this sadhana. This is how you will know that the sadhana is working. All various things are there. It's not something you can just randomly, wake up one morning and feel that just go there and do it. No. The difference is, when you're doing a sadhana at home, suppose if you make a mistake, you can still recover from it. In the cremation ground setting, you make a mistake, you will end up in a very, very bad shape, from which you yourself can never recover. You'll need somebody else to help you out, if at all you find a person like that. So, on the other hand, if it is correctly done, if it is rightly guided, then it gives a fantastic boost to the sadhana. A certain deities specifically who have links to cremation grounds like Kali, etc., for example, definitely those sadhanas will work very fast, assuming that the right individual is doing it.
Dear sir, the question is related to the ritual of Bali, sacrifice of animals to Kali, and its significance in Shakti Tantra. I asked this question also highlighting Seer Sri Aurobindo's conversation with Nirod Bharan on the topic of sacrifice of animals to Kali, where I quote the exchange below. Um, Nirod Bharan, what about the sacrifice of harmless animals to Kali? Sri Aurobindo says useless and therefore inadvisable. External sacrifices of this kind have no longer any meaning, as so many saints have said. Sacrifice ego, anger, lust, etc. to Kali, not goats or cocks. As someone interested in the truth in the subject, with humility I seek to know how one must view the subject, and I find it confusing when people like yourself show support to the sacrifice of animals, whereas Sri Aurobindo says it's useless. I absolutely agree that when it comes to allowing one's religion the right, but snatching the right of another religion, another being is logically flawed. But here I move past the Hindu Muslim angle and ask a more fundamental question. Would Ma Kali like it more if I sacrifice my greed, lust, anger, or would a sliced head of a hen or a cock or a goat please her more? This is by Kamini K.
Okay. The first, before I start answering, this is a question that comes up hundreds of times, same topic. Before I start answering, let me say that I hold Sri Aurobindo in very high regards. There have been very few philosophers and writers and spiritual beings of his caliber. There's no doubt about that. Having said that, let me also make it clear that Sri Aurobindo was not doing tantric upasana. His method of sadhana was entirely different. He used to sit for hours, perhaps in one text I was reading, sometimes 7-8 hours of sadhana, not sadhana, meditative sadhana, and he has various his integral yoga is a different path slightly. So if you are approaching a deity through that path, you do not need to do any of these things. Why sacrifice? You don't need to do elaborate rituals of a deity. You don't need a yantra of a deity. Sri Aurobindo never used a yantra. Sri Aurobindo never used, to the best of my knowledge, any mala to do a japa of a deity. His path was different. His path is valid in his domain, with due respect. And he was a great, great seer. Point number one. Point number two is that these paths, the way Sri Aurobindo approached when he was worshipping any deity, for example, when he was worshipping even Kali, for that matter, it would be more a meditative experience and getting an inner experience of the deity. which is, and then after the inner experience matures to a certain point, then that power becomes accessible to an individual to some degree. Suppose he is very high up in his method of sadhana. The tantric approach to upasana is entirely different. This was what I told that Sri Aurobindo used to do. Now let's come to the tantric way of sadhana, which is entirely different. As I mentioned in another question, that if you're doing upasana based on bhakti, for example, of the deity of Kali, say, there are certain forms of Kali that can be worshipped at home, worshipped with entire with how would I put it, in the bhakti mode of sadhana. You can do fasting, vratas, and all that. And across North India, we see that during Navratras, most of the time, what people do is they'll fast and then they'll chant some stotras or this or that, etc. Few things. And then they'll feed young girls and things. Basic idea they have. So that is the Lokika way, the Pauranika way of doing sadhana. Let's put it this way. Whereas the tantric way is very precise, very technical way of doing sadhana. It is not enough that I have devotion for the deity. It is important equally that if you are following the tantric way, that I do it exactly as mentioned in texts, because this is what has given results and this is what has been revealed by Shiva in the texts. So if you have to approach this deity, then you have to do this mantra, you have to do it this number of times, you have to sit on that day. And if it is supposed to be 1000 chant of the mantra, then you have to do it 1000. You cannot do 999, nor can you do 1001. Both of these will not result in the give you the result that you're looking for. So precision is at the very heart of Tantra Sadhana, first thing. Number two, I think the person who put the question said that, won't the deity be more pleased if I sacrifice my ego, lust and all that? What will the deity do with you sacrificing your ego, lust? Even if you keep it or you sacrifice it, how does it make the deity happy or unhappy? उनके साथ तुम्हारा क्या संबंध है? You sacrifice. See, this is the fundamental misunderstanding that you have. When a path of sadhana, and even Tantra sadhana also tells you that you have to go beyond the Ashtapashas, 8 chains that bind the consciousness, and the Shata Ripus, 6 Ripus or flaws that you have. You are not doing it for the deity. Do not make this mistake that you are doing it so the deity is going to be very happy and come down and put a garland on your shoulder, on your head. Nothing at all. You are doing it only for yourself. You are doing it because it will help you access the deity faster, not because the deity has asked you. Deity likes to, he or she doesn't really care. Not until you have attained to a state where you can communicate with the deity. Remember that analogy we have. I gave you in another example that somebody likes a film star, keeps writing letters, puts up posters. Achhi baat hai, film star doesn't even know you exist. So you have to attain to a stature where when you mention the name of the film star, say you put up a tweet or a post, the film star says, oh, this person, he is very famous, usne kuch likha hai, to zarur kuch hoga, may even call you up and see what's going on, things like that. So your presence is acknowledged by the deity only when you have been able to lift yourself to that stature. Unless you are able to lift yourself to that stature, your this concept that there is the huge deity and all benign and all kind to you and always looking down, it is not entirely true. That's more of a monotheistic conception of deity, that there is one God and he's always kind and is looking up. There are here, each deity is capable of taking you to a tremendous experience in sadhana, but each deity has his or her own nature, own specific tendencies, what he or she likes, etc. So keeping that in mind, the methods of sadhana were designed. So that is why to Shiva we offer bay leaves. We don't offer tulsi to Shiva. Whereas to Krishna we offer tulsi because Krishna likes that. I'm giving a basic example. So there are certain forms of goddesses, certain forms of Shaktis for whom Bali works very well. There is absolutely no denying it. I mean, whether somebody likes it or dislikes it is a different matter, but there is no question about it. And this is mentioned in scriptures. This has been experienced by Siddhas and Upasakas beforehand also. Not all forms, but some forms, yes. There is no doubt about that. And in fact, the Kalika Puran, which is one of the most powerful Shakta, it's actually a Shakta tantric text, but though it's named as Kalika Puran, it has a fantastic, it has a chapter, full chapter. It's called the Rudhira Adhyaya, which is the blood episodes, if you translate it. Okay, so this gives entire details about how the bali process has to be given to which deity of the Kali Kula Krama, and what happens if you do the bali and how it is to be done. There are tremendous details. For example, even before bali, the very kharga through which bali has to be given has to be worshipped, infused with mantras. The pashu whose bali has to be given has to be worshipped, various things and specific tithis, and it's a full ritual in itself. Now, importance of bali is so high that it mentions that there are alternatives to giving pashu bali. You can give bali of sugarcane, you can give bali of certain kinds of vegetables, but only those things. So again, as I mentioned, everything is very precise in tantra. So you cannot just pick up an apple and say, I'm giving a bali of an apple. It will not work. The ritual will not work. Instead of an apple, there is a specific, say, a sugarcane bali is given to certain forms of the mother. There's a specific vegetable. I don't know what it's called in English. In Bengali, we call it chalkumbo. Uh, that specific vegetable is given as a bali to the mother. So those precisely those things can be offered, and those things are the only ones to be offered. Either whether you are giving a pashu bali or whether you are giving a vegetarian bali, bali is necessary in the tantric krama of upasana, because the moment the bali is given at that time with the right mantra, it causes a tremendous upsurge of power, upsurge of shakti inside in the environment, and along with that in the upasaka. And if we follow the the logic that is given in the shastras, the dictum that is given in the shastras, and by the way, in here there is a similarity between what the tantric texts mention and some of the older Vedic texts, that while ahimsa is a thing that is very good in general in life, pashubali that happens in the process of a yajna is not to be considered as himsa, because the deity itself ensures that the animal gets a higher rebirth if it is correctly done, if the process is correctly done. So these are things that are actually mentioned in texts. My point is that if you're doing a tantric upasana, whether you are giving whether you want there are certain rituals, for example, whether you don't want to give a pashu bali, fine, but you'll still have to give a bali that is vegetarian. So the first question you have to ask is that why at all is bali so important? Even what is the big thing about giving bali of a chalkumbra or a sugarcane? Why is it necessary? What happens if I don't give the bali? Until you understand that, you will never understand why pashu bali is important. And then you will realize that the necessity for pashu bali in certain cases is because when Shakti has to be projected outside, that is when you have to give a sacrifice of a pashu. Whereas Shakti has to be internalized into some other processes. That is when you need to give a sacrifice of something that is vegetarian. For example, sacrifice of a sugarcane or things like that. Again, these are specifics. So as I keep repeating over the course of this talk, that you cannot randomly pick up something and just give a bali. That will not work. So overall, in the tantric path, in certain specific kinds of tantra specifically, bali is absolutely mandatory. There is no question about it. Anybody who feels disturbed by bali should first ask oneself genuinely that why is bali of vegetarian items also mandated in the tantras? I mean, it's not about that, fine, you don't want to give a pashu bali, you give a bali of a vegetarian specific ingredient that is given. So until you understand the necessity of the bali, you'll never understand the question of why pashu bali or why even sugarcane bali is secondary. And this you will understand when you experience it. And so that is why our systems are like this. The Shastras tell you that this is the way to go. People have followed that way and they have attained to high states. So we also follow that way. This is the basic format. You do not innovate into that because you do not have the capacity to innovate. You don't even know. When you enter the path, you are at class 1. So how will you know that the class 12 syllabus is correct or not? That is only somebody who has passed the exam can tell you, right? So like that. So Sri Aurobindo is right in his way, in his integral yoga and other yogic paths, etc. When it comes to the tantric path, this is how it is to be done.
Is pashu bali mandatory? So I want to ask that. The second part is there any mark within Shakti Tantra where one can substitute only Matsya and Mans that require killing and still retain the remaining?
So in the Panchamakara, we do have evidences of Purva Upasakas of very high caliber who, on being allowed by the Guru, would skip one of the other of the makaras or substitute them with an anukalpa. Anukalpa is a substitute. Again, specific substitutes are used. It cannot be anything random. Say in some sampradayas, for example, instead of alcohol, if you have to substitute that, ritualized alcohol, instead of that, you use coconut water or use water that is mixed with gur and kept for some time. So things like that. There are other substitutes also. It depends on the sampradaya. Again, they have some links to some of the texts which mention these substitutes. So definitely it's possible, but for that you have to speak to your guru. If the guru allows you, you can do that.
From Shakti Tantra point of view, what is enlightenment? And is it the same thing as in Yoga Karma? Stops acting on the person, attainment of first samadhi, perfect stillness, thoughtlessness in mind, recalling earlier lifetimes, the right to become guru to other yogis, freedom from compulsion to be born again after death, ability to see karmic lines between people, or is it something else?
This is all this and much more than that. So all this that has been mentioned, instead of making it piecemeal manner that okay, I attain some this power and I am a guru to XYZ and this and that, etc. In one line, you can mention that the moment the upasaka attains to a state where the deity is worshipping, the divine mother actually accepts him and starts working through his mind and body, all these things will be taken care of automatically, and something more will be given. So you not only want moksha after death, that you go to a very high state, you want to become a free, absolutely free individual uh, when still being alive, and that can happen when there is a perfect communion between the upasaka and the deity, which happens at the very high state. So that time you live among people, but you live like a god among people. This is the final aim of the sadhana. And yes, your karmic lines, whatever your baggages that you carry, those obviously have to be finished off. Only then you will be able to reach that stage. And the reason why Upasana of Shakti is given so much prominence is because the Shakti Tattva is something that is slightly easier to understand and experience for a person at this age. The Ishvara Tattva is more different. It is, you require a lot of purity even before you can enter that state. And if you don't have that purity, you will end up into a lot of theoretical speculations. Okay, this Tattva is working, yeah, this principle is working, that philosophy is working. That's one thing. Whereas Shakti Tattva is something that is here. Even the conception of the 36 elements that form the universe in the Shaiva system of Kashmir, they basically mention that it is the Shakti of Shiva that comes down slowly into the universe and forms everything that is there, which means there is a presence of Shakti right down in this plane. It is slightly more easier to experience. And once you experience that, it is that Shakti that will keep guiding you, that will rearrange the karmas, that will make you walk, talk, sit, whatever needs to be done till the time you attain to a state which is beyond the human condition. And the moment you enter a state beyond the human condition, samadhi and all that is definitely there, but it's not necessarily samadhi in the state that you close your eyes and you enter into a samadhi. That's one state. You may be in a state of samadhi even with your eyes open. Suppose your mind has been completely transcended not into a void, kind of the the Bodha way, where you enter into a nirvana. There, nirvana is everything is a big shunya sort of. I'm not going to details of it, but very loosely speaking, here your mind is transformed completely, and it becomes sort of, the mind itself becomes like a mantra, an alive mantra. So whatever thoughts enter into your mind, whatever actions you perform, automatically there is a link and it becomes siddha, it becomes self-fulfilling. It will have a tremendous actualizing power in itself. And this cannot come until there is a blessing from the deity. So this is the final aim of the process, so that you transcend the human condition and you understand what it feels to be like a god. Absolute freedom, which we cannot imagine even. It's beyond the capacity of the human mind to imagine what that state is. So this is the final aim of the tantric process.
You once explained in great detail what all stages does the English term liberation pack in itself, but not enlightenment. Can you please do that if it's okay?
This question is not specific to the topic we have, but very briefly, enlightenment is different grades of very high order spiritual experience. For example, since we are on the topic of tantra, so when we look at the first 5 elements of the Kashmiri Shaivism, that starts from the Shuddha tattvas, and then you have the Ishvara tattva, and then beyond that you have Sadashiva. So the moment from the layer of the Shuddha tattvas, you are already enlightened, by the way. You cannot enter into the realm of the Shuddha tattva until you attain what is conventionally known as enlightenment. It's a very high state. Only thing is, in Shuddha tattva, you attain it through the power of the mantras. The mantras are living entities there. They are like enlightened beings. Like, imagine a mantra to be like a sage that pulls you there to that state, and you experience that freedom. Only there's going to be slight shade in that freedom. So shade means, for example, as they explained to it, there is the concept of you're free. You experience what is known as the aham of Shiva, which is the ultimate sense of I, which is not your ego, but it is an I that creates the universe. That I you experience. But at the same time, you also experience the universe. So you, that aham is there, that idam is there. You are here, and the world is also there. World has not vanished. Beyond that, you go into the Ishvara Tattva, where the sense of the world slightly recedes back a little bit. You realize that the world is there, but the world is your projection. Then you go to Sadashiva Tattva, and then you see that the sense of aham becomes even stronger inside. And you believe that the world is there, but it is within me. The world is not outside of me. And then beyond that, you go to the Shiva and the Shakti Tattvas and the Anuttara Tattva. Those perhaps cannot be experienced through a human body. Those are tattvas very, very high. The inexplicable. I mean, you can only have a mental, theoretical formula understanding of it. But experiential understanding, perhaps you need to be nothing less than a rishi to go to that state. I'm just guessing. So enlightenment is all of this. The moment you enter into the realm of Shuddha Tattva, you are enlightened. And as you keep going higher and higher, there are certain more subtle changes that will happen, certain changes in the caliber of the experience that will happen. So in that sense, enlightenment is always there is a very broadly we use a threshold that, okay, after you cross this, then you reach enlightenment. No, beyond that also there are gradations of enlightenment. Like there is this typical very nice example that I read in a book. Suppose there's a glass of water and there is water in the ocean. Both of them are water. So both of them have the feeling of we are one with the Brahman, whatever way you look at it. So this is also water, that is also water. The water in an ocean can actually support an ecosystem. It can create a cyclone, it can create a storm, it can create various things. So the difference is that both of them are enlightenment, but one has higher caliber of Shakti available in that enlightenment. So like this, there are gradations.
Does the Shakti Tantra have its origins in Shaivagam? And if so, how did it evolve into a self-sustained spiritual ecosystem?
I think we addressed this point at the last talk session I had. But basically, yeah, it's not just the Shaiva Agamas, but it also had the Bhairava Agamas from which it evolved. Additionally, there was the Kola Tantra that evolved from Eastern India, basically, from around the temple of Kamakhya. That's where the Kalika Puran, etc. was written. And then eventually there were texts and other things that came up, specific tantric texts, which further formulated the path and sort of took the upasana of Shakti became prominent, and the upasana of Shiva receded to the background in the path, in these parts, in the proper Shakta tantras eventually.
Which is the one tantric text that you would highly recommend as a serious practitioner reading thoroughly to enhance their body of knowledge? These days, most English literate sadhaks get introduced to Tantra through Robert Swoboda's books, but is there any other source?
That's a difficult question, actually. Yeah, most people start with the Aghora series of books by Dr. Swoboda, and then there are, some of the preliminary texts that were translated by Arthur Avalon. Those are also decent. But see, if you're a practitioner, if you're into the path, then you have to read the tantras that are given prominence in your sampradaya, and you have to understand them, not just read them like reading any texts. You have to do your practice, you have to read them again, do your practice again, read them. So that way your understanding of the path will become a little bit broader. But by and large, there are most of the literature that I've found till date is mostly either they sort of hyperbolize the practices and make it look something very esoteric, like another Harry Potter series going on, things like that, or on the other end of the spectrum, they'll make it extremely technical, so technical that somebody who's outside of the system will not make sense of it. I cannot recommend any specific book because I haven't found anything that sort of covers the middle ground properly. About the Aghora books, they're very good to read, but they're only books good to read if you are I believe personally that if you are at the very preliminary stage of sadhana. Once you enter into the field of sadhana, there are actually, in fact, yes, there are books which are quite good, but they are not in English. They are in local languages. I mean, I know quite a few very, very good books in Bengali. There are books, very good books, I'm sure, in other Indian languages as well. that speak of tantric methods of sadhana, etc., or at least the biographies of actual saints or saintly siddhas who have walked this path. So when you read those biographies, sometimes you may find some clue to how your sadhana is working, or if there is any conversational text between somebody and a high caliber expert. So I know in Bengali there are a few, but English I don't think I've come across anything like that. It's either too academic kind of scholarly text written, or the other end of the spectrum is too Harry Potter kind of miraculous text written. It's miracles are a part of tantra, part of any upasana for that matter, not just tantra. And what is miracle? The moment there is a change inside, you will see things happening in a way which is difficult to explain in the normal rationality and logic. So that's what it is. So I don't think I can effectively answer any question, but the best option is, if you have to progress in the path, then start your sadhana and then find out the tantric texts that are pertaining to the sampradaya that you are connected to and the deity that you are worshipping, and read those texts, and not once, read them multiple times. Initial times when you read them, you'll not even figure out. It will seem like just like a document of very technical document. Okay, this is a mantra, you should do it this number of times, this is the mandala, etc., etc. But as your mind becomes more subtle to the power of the mantra, you will find inside those writings also there are fantastic clues mentioned, clues, certain hints and clues, etc., which can make your practice even stronger. That is only if you are in the path of sadhana. If you're not in the sadhana, then just reading a tantric text is meaningless. Actually, you'll perhaps not even figure out many of the injunctions mentioned there, because it's not only about knowing the language. There are certain areas where the language is even mentioned as slightly coded language, so that the non-initiates cannot understand them. So there's one upasana of Kali where it is mentioned that if you do not worship without Adya Shakti, then it is equivalent to Abhichara. There is a half sloka in one of the upasanas of Kali that is mentioned. So people, if you just read it, you will think that, okay, I have to worship Adya Shakti, and then you have to worship Kali. But Adya Shakti here is a term that specifically means that you'll have to do this upasana along with your partner, along with your wife. Then only it will work. But instead of that, they use the term Adya Shakti. So here again, behind that also there is one krama. How does why exactly is the wife called an Adya? Because Tantric Upasana, both husband and wife can do this together. It's much like the original Vedic systems where, if you have to sit for a Vedic yajna, you need to get married. Only then you are allowed to sit for certain yajnas and things like that. Same way in the Tantric systems, there are certain upasanas where both husband and wife can participate. So like this, there are different places where certain language that is used is not exactly the sense that will come out if you just read it like that. So that is why there is the importance of the sampradaya also.
What are the nimitts, and how does one know the authenticity of a nimitt? Is reliance on nimitt indispensable in Tantra sadhana?
Reliance on nimittas is indispensable in all sadhanas, not just Tantra sadhana, but only when there is when the practice has started creating some changes inside. If that change has not happened right from day one, if people start looking at nimittas, they are bound to make mistake. So because at any given moment, there is something or the other always happening. So if you start finding logic and meaning behind that, then you will end up completely confused and not sure, and your mind will get weaker and weaker. But it is when you have attained to a certain proficiency, to a certain depth in the sadhana, that is when, if there is a certain nimitta that comes, you will be able to correctly interpret it. And how do you know it is working? Whether the interpretation is correct. So you interpret something that, okay, you saw this nimitta, that means XYZ result should come. If the result has come, you know that the nimitta was correct. And if that happens, say you take 10 examples and you see that 7 out of 10 times it happens, that means your interpretation of the nimitta is working correctly. If on the other hand you see that 7 out of 10 times it is not working, that means that it's more a fluke in your mind. So nimitta will work only when the sadhana that you're doing is actually working inside you properly. It has taken you to a slightly higher state. That is when you can interpret it properly. And as I said, it's not just tantric upasana. Every upasana, nimitta is very important. Nimitta, in fact, the deity sends a nimitta, the mantra creates the nimitta, etc. Various things are there.
We often come across stories that in certain kshetras, certain Siddha Purushs have scaled down the Shakti of the deity. For instance, Bhamakhepa in Tarapit. What does this signify?
So Bhamakhepa and Tarapet is, I won't call it scaling down. Perhaps it is a little bit of scaling down only. That is because it just signifies that the original force of the deity was perhaps too strong for people of this age to be able to absorb that kind of power. And when it comes specifically to Tarapet, it's believed not Bhamakhepa exactly, it is Vashishta who scaled down the power of Ugratara. And he did it by making a slight change in the mantra of Tara, slight change in the Vija. So there is an older mantra of Tara that is found in texts, which by and large, the consensus is that it does not lead to Siddhi if somebody is doing that mantra. So there is a change that has to be brought into that mantra. And this mantric change was performed by Vashishta while doing Upasana of Tara at Tarapit in order that why did he do it? That is, the story at least says that once he had a vision of the goddess, he realized that most people are incapable of worshipping uh, the deity because she is so ferocious. So in order that the energy of the deity is slightly more slightly toned down, say, slightly takes a form that's slightly easier for people to access. So that is why he requested the deity to change into something that is little less fierce. I mean, even then, Ugratara is very fierce, and in Tarapit, it's the deity of the cremation ground. So she definitely is fierce, there's no doubt. But there was still that slight amount of change which allowed a lot of people to actually progress in the Tara Upasana and attain to very high perfection. And this is encoded in the change in the mantra of the Tara Mahavidya. Slight amount of change. I mean, all major tantric texts mention this incident. And they mention that the mantra was changed so that it's easier for people to access. Uh, Having said that, there are many other examples in South and other temples specifically where we find that Sri Yantra has been installed and the deity has been, its power has been reduced, etc. I have mixed views on this. That is possible, but perhaps in some instances, just my personal view, it would have been better if the original power of the deity was kept as it is. So sometimes we need the, it's like this, the Shakta Upasana has to cover the full range. There has to be the softest and the most Somya form of the deity, and we also have to have options for the most aggressive form of the deity. The full range must be covered. And only one who can do all of that is the greatest of the greatest of the Kolas, the Mahakola is the greatest, who is like Shiva himself who becomes.
Sir, if you could please tell why a sadhak does Jap Samarpan in the right hand of the male deity and in the left hand for the female deity.
So that is because mainly because the path of Shakti is considered to be the left hand path. So if you look at the progression of the um, sadhana, the progression of the achara, the various modes of tantric sadhana, you have dakshinachara. Dakshinachara sadhana is basically still following the conventionally accepted way. It's like you are going in the clockwise direction, the way the world moves. You are doing sadhana in that, and you are progressing in that. Dakshinachara also will lead to progress. And then you go into the Vamachara, which is just the anti-clockwise, the reverse direction. The Vamachara or the reverse direction is where you will have the beginning of what is known as the Panchamakara and the other things that come into play in this sadhana upasana. That is the path basically where Shakta upasana is very important. Where that is the path of Shakti, which is not this conventional way. It's like, to put it otherwise, it's the anti-clockwise way of attaining perfection in the same sadhana. So, by and large, the conception is perhaps it has got something to do with our human psychology. So, when we give it to the left hand of the deity, the other thing is that which is um, done to the left hand, that which is given to the left hand of the deity is, in fact, you will see that the mantra specifically asks the deity when giving it to the left hand is that you have to keep it hidden. The more you keep it hidden, the more it germinates into something more powerful. Whereas the conventional sadhanas, when we give it to the right hand, there are multiple mantras for offering to the right hand. In fact, not in some sampradayas which are sort of non-mainstream sampradayas, Sabar sampradayas and others, they give it to the guru instead of the right hand of the male deity. They offer it to the guru. So that which is given to the right hand is basically sort of to look at it, that one way is that you are doing the samarpana to in the conventional way to the conventional deity. So when you are worshipping sort of a male deity, say if you're worshipping Shiva, there are certain conventional ways in sadhana you are doing. But the moment you are doing it in the non-conventional way, the let's put it the Vamachara method, the anti-clockwise way, etc. There, it is important that the process remains a little bit hidden so that it gets certain power inside it and gives you the power. So when you are giving it to the deity, when you're giving it to her, to your Ishta Devi after the sadhana, you are actually asking her that to keep it hidden so that it gives me siddhi. This is the term that is used in the samarpana of the mantra. So I am assuming that is the reason why, because the feminine force, what is called Shakti, has a link to the left hand side, both psychologically and physically, whereas the masculine force has a link to the right hand side. So this is perhaps the reason why when we are doing an upasana of a form of Shakti, we give the mantra to her left hand and ask her to keep it hidden until we attain Siddhi.
What are the key differences in deities and their upasana residing in similar places? For example, Shamshan Tara, Shamshan Kali, and Mahakal.
Okay, so this is I can only these are questions which have no clear direct answers. So you will not like it's not like a text says that this is how it is. I can only tell you the way I look at it, how I understand this. So very simply put, when you worship Bhairava, and not just Smashan Bhairava, Bhairava is a form when you go higher, the form of Shiva. When you go deeper into Upasana of Bhairava, he has a strong connection to the cremation ground. That much is certain, and all elements that live there. But Bhairava is the Purusha Tattva that is inside the cremation ground. That which is Purusha Tattva is what, even in normal sadhana, that which is a little bit more detached, that which is the witness of things, that is less the actor of things, that is seeing things and not really acting on things. That is the basic nature of the Purusha Tattva. So Bhairava's nature is also somewhat like this, though Bhairava is also active if you are specifically invoking him for certain sadhanas and things like that. But on principle, Bhairava is that which provides the steadiness in the cremation ground. So any upasana in cremation ground, whatever deity you have to worship Bhairava in the process, whatever be the main deity. Mahakali or Smashan Kali is basically, it's the whole sum total of the whole energy that is there in the cremation ground. The complete, absolute power that is there, full. And that means both the higher kinds of power as well as the lower kinds of entities, things that are bound in the cremation grounds, like spirits and various other beings who cannot leave the area of the cremation ground to stay there, or any other kind of entity there. If you add everything together, the energy that you get and personify that, that is Kali. She's always absolute. That is her nature. There are no half measures with her. Either full scale or she will not be there. Whereas Tara, on the other hand, is like analogous to in the cremation ground. If you just enter into the cremation ground at night, if there's no light, it's absolute darkness. You don't know whether you're going left, whether you're going right, what are you doing, kahan pe baith rahe ho, and it's kind of an unnerving experience. In that circumstance, and today you have torchlights and all that, perhaps centuries ago you had nothing of that sort. So how do you actually navigate your way inside the cremation ground? How do you know where you have to sit, what you have to do? Because there's no light, and most of these rituals are done at night. So there is not even, and not only night, some of them are done specifically on new moon nights, Amavasya, but there is not even a moon there. So that is when the light that comes out from the pyre that is burning is going to act as a guide for you. This is the physical reality of a cremation ground. So that light which guides you inside the cremation ground, that is Tara. That is the cremation ground Tara. She is the one who will tell you with her blessings, those who have that blessings and those rare great souls who have blessings of Tara in the cremation ground, will perform the ritual to absolute perfection. Koi galti hoga hi nahi. Because she is the one who's like a guru, and she can act as a guru. Among the Mahavidyas, she is the one who can act as a guru in any circumstance, be it inside a cremation ground or inside your house or inside anywhere else, once she decides to take Pasaka under her fold. So she knows how to do, what to do, how much to do, what results will come, etc. So these are sort of, if you look at an analogy, this is how these three deities operate inside the realm of the cremation ground.
Rajashri sir, is initiation required for reciting the Ashtotra Shatnama or Sahasranama of any of the Mahavidyas, particularly Bhagavati Kali, Tara, Sundari, and Bhuvaneshwari?
No, but it's good to actually, before you start off an aggressive form, it's good to actually take advice from somebody that whether it's suitable for you. I mean, just don't randomly jump. I mean, and there can be no thumb rule about this because obviously it depends on individual to individual. By and large, for reciting the Ashtottara Nama, you don't need an initiation. I mean, it's just the names. Names can be chanted by anybody. But mind you, do not add mantras to it. Some people do the Ashtottara by adding some Putikarana of Vija mantras before, after, etc. All that you cannot do. You can just chant the names. But even then, it is best to actually take advice from somebody that if you're doing Kali or some of the aggressive forms, that whether it's suitable for you or not. Like that. You don't need initiation, just some advice is fine.
With regards to mantra sadhana, if you have completed a full mantra, Purush Charana, and you have not attained Siddhi, what remedies are there?
No, there are no remedies. If you have attained mantra Purushcharana and not attained Siddhi, which is perhaps the most likely scenario in 99.9% cases, that means you have to do more Purushcharana. In fact, the Tantric texts mention this clearly that in Kali Yuga, in fact, as Kali Yuga becomes more advanced, the amount of corruption that is going to be there is so heavy that doing one Purushcharana is not enough. You have to do 4 Purushcharanas for each mantra, which means if a specific, say, the Shiva Panchakshari requires 5 lakh japa, so you have to do 20 lakhs, 4 times that. And each time you have to do it with following all the rules, which means you start with the sankalpa, you do this amount of japa, you do homas of it, you do tarpana, you do marjana, you feed people, bhojana, etc. Then again, the tantric texts tell you that do Purushcharana in different places. So first Purushcharana you did, say 1 lakh you did at home. Next 1 lakh you go to some kshetra of Shiva and you sit there for 10 days. 10 days, actually for a mantra like Panchakshari mantra, a decent caliber sadhak should be able to finish 1 lakh japa in 5 to 6 days. If you have nothing else to do, that is. I'm saying. So you take you take few days off, you go to you go to Kashi or you go to Ujjain or any other powerful Shiva temple and you stay close by and you do the mantra Purushcharana there. Then after that you have a guru, then you can go and ask the guru if there's an ashram, your guru has an ashram. You want to stay in the ashram and do the Purushcharana in front of your guru. Or next Purushcharana, you may actually do it in a, where there are in a cow shed, Goshala. Certain Purushcharanas work very well in certain places. So like this, it didn't work in one shot. That is because the amount of corruption that is there today is highly unlikely that anybody's Purushcharana in one shot will work. I mean, the only I remember personally once, in one instance, I did get a very good result in Purushcharana. That's because my guru had specifically given me a mantra, and I remember the day I completed that mantra, the japa of that mantra, I had a very peculiar and fantastic experience of the deity, quite out of the blue. Was not expecting that, and that experience had stayed with me for a long time. But that was because before starting the Purushcharana, my guru had specifically instructed that specific sadhana for me. It was not even a general and generic sadhana for everybody. By and large, one Purushcharana is unlikely to give you effects. So you will have to keep doing more, at least 3 to 4 Purushcharana. Minimum it's required in this age.
Does the result of sadhana change according to gradation of diksha, like the sadhak with the mantra updesh of mantra get the same result as a sadhak with the abhishek diksha of the same mantra?
Definitely. This is the before that. In one of the interesting things that you will, if you study this text more, you will see that when it comes to Shakti Upasana, when you are worshipping a form of the goddess, and specifically when you are worshipping a Mahavidya, then Abhishek Diksha is considered as mandatory. I mean, if you have to go higher. Whereas if you worship, whether you worship in the form of, bhakti mode of to a deity, or whether you're worshipping a male deity, whether you're worshipping Shiva or whether you're worshipping Vishnu or Ganapati or Surya, etc., Abhishek is not mandatory. You do not need to have mantra Abhishek. You can have any kind of diksha. You can have even a mantra upadesham and start off, that may work. But when it comes to worshipping of Shakti and specifically the Mahavidyas or the Siddha Vidyas, either the Mahavidya or the Siddha Vidya, those are higher order Shaktis. It is mentioned as mandatory to have a Shakta Abhishek Diksha and then go by this krama. Why? That is because only when you do this, if the Diksha is properly done, it rearranges your karmas to some degree. It's like you are entering into the path, but it's sort of so to give an analogy, for example, when you're doing mantra japa, you don't have a Abhishek Diksha and you're doing mantra japa. So you start off in your vehicle, you're going to a certain destination, and after some time, you spend your own money and you take some amount of fuel into the car and vehicle and you start going. So there is some amount of expenditure from your part that is going on. Given the road is very long, you may not suppose and you do not have too much money on you. So there is only so much of fuel, etc. you can take in and keep going. Whereas an Abhishek Diksha is something like the Guru actually fills the car's petrol tank to half and then says that, okay, you baki rest you put in, I have already given you half the fuel, and you start off. If the Abhishek Diksha is correctly done, it kind of rearranges the karmas to some degree. Point number 2 is because Shakti mantras work very fast, and there is a good reason why though initially the tantric systems had all, like there is a tantra for Vaishnava deities also. There are mantras of Krishna and Rama and every Vaishnava deity. Shaiva deities, of course, are there. But it is eventually what happened is it is only the Shakta tantras that became most prominent and most popular among all deities. But that is because the tantric upasana approach towards Shakti works incredibly fast. There is definitely going to be results. If you have the right mindset and you're given the right diksha and the right process to do in the tantric, within the tantric circle, scheme of things, etc. So, in order that what happens is if you attain Shakti too fast, your mind and body is not pure enough to hold that Shakti. It is 10 times easier to lose that Shakti by making some mistake, whether consciously or unconsciously. So having an Abhishek Diksha also helps you stall the process of losing Shakti. While it is not a guarantee at all, I mean, I've seen way too many people by now who are very high order Abhishek Dikshas, Purna Abhishek and all that. It's still, to be very honest, the amount of Shakti they possess is very minor. That's because as it is, everything has become corrupted to some degree. So it's easier to get the Dikshas once you enter into this circle, you will find people, you start taking a Diksha after a few years, you'll get another one. But that does not really reflect in the kind of Shakti that is there in the Upasana. So eventually what happens is their sort of life gets into a bit of a point is if you have a Purnabhishek Diksha, you are good enough to actually solve just about any problem. To be very honest, if it's in the ideal condition, but that ideal condition is not there anymore because people really do not spend working on the basics of sadhana, to be honest. And that's one of the things that I've observed way too often. But even then also, it is important to have the Abhishek Diksha because Abhishek Diksha gives you a kind of a little bit of boost in Shakti Upasana and it helps you to stall the leakage of Shakti that will happen once you start attaining Shakti. Attaining Shakti is very easy. Holding on to that Shakti, 10 times more difficult. Applying that Shakti, 100 times more difficult. Because applying that Shakti, problem is you have to know where to apply, how much to apply, how much not to apply. There, if you make a mistake, you will get a 10 times accelerated karmic reaction. And that karmic reaction is going to make you fall down right from wherever you might be to a condition which is far worse than when you even started the sadhana. But all Upasana of Shakti is basically broadly broken into 3 parts. Where you generate the Shakti, where you integrate the Shakti into your mind and body, and third, when you are able to apply it into the outside world, whether for your benefit, whether for somebody else, whether for general uplift of dharma, whatever it is. And tantras give you that liberty. Tantra is not at all saying that you should 100% have to be nishkam and you cannot ask for anything. Not at all. There are tantras that give you that these processes are there. And why just tantras? Even a Hanuman Chalisa, if you read, you will have a Falastuti at the end, with what results it can produce. So, as long as Tantra is a way of maximizing Upasana, rest, whether an application is right or wrong, that is up to your ethical judgment. If you do a wrong application, accordingly you'll face a reaction. That much is certain. So in that sense, the Abhishek Diksha actually is very important because it ensures that you do not lose Shakti easily. It ensures that your karmic balance is slightly rearranged so that your thinking process is uplifted, all these things. That is, if the Abhishek Diksha is done properly. And also, it gives you a boost in your sadhana. But by only only Abhishek is not enough, by the way. I mean, there are a lot of people with Abhishek Dikshas and still haven't attained anything. You will have to still do a lot of hard work. Hard work, following the rules, following the processes that are set in place, then you have a scope that perhaps you can succeed, genuinely succeed, and you can experience the high states that are mentioned in the texts, and which previous, great Upasakas earlier have attained to.
You mentioned that Shakti cannot be learnt without a guru's initiation and a guidance. A guru will clearly not accept a disciple merely on the basis of curiosity. In fact, that may even be considered irrelevant. So, what would be the minimum qualification by which a guru might consider a disciple?
Oh, that is for the guru to judge. That's because minimum qualification, uh, a desire for the path. You don't just end into tantra. It's not like, one fine day I'm walking down the street and tomorrow suddenly I take a diksha. Asani, you have a understanding that what you are getting into. So this is the path. This is the deity. You have an attraction for a Mahavidya Upasana, then you have to enter into tantra. There is no other way to worship Mahavidyas properly. This is the 10 Mahavidyas are within the field of tantra. There's no other way. So the guru decides based on various factors. For example, whether the person has genuine interest in that, whether the person is capable of doing sadhana at all. In earlier ages, in earlier times, they would even give the disciple first a mantra upadesha and say that you just chant this for some time, maybe 6 months to a year or something, or 2 years. In fact, there is one sampradaya, not very highly revered sampradaya, one of the best. I consider them one of the best. They may make a person wait for 3 to 4 years before giving diksha. They'll give you some mantra and they'll tell you that keep chanting it. And once you keep chanting it, you come and meet the guru every 6 months or a year or something like that. And they will see whether what progress you're making. And only when you have made certain degree of progress, then only they will give you the Abhishek Diksha. And until the Abhishek Diksha comes in, you cannot perform the Tantric Karma Kanda. That is the next stage of sadhana that comes in. On the other hand, there are many sampradayas, as it happens in this age, they perhaps won't even check anything. If you're interested, they'll just give you the Abhishek Diksha straight away. And they'll give you some basic theoretical idea and some very high level, fundas, like you worship the goddess, so you become very high and things like that. Those are all upar ka funda hai. But eventually they will give you the Diksha. But in my opinion, the test, I'm not a guru or anything, but if I were a guru, the first test is that give a simple mantra. Allow them 1-2 years of time to practice that mantra. And you will know what signs are there. Anybody who has done sadhana will have a clear, definite understanding of what are the signs of progress in mantra sadhana. If that individual is able to carry even that simple mantra to some degree of proficiency, then only comes the next stage of Abhisheka Diksha and things like that. But unfortunately, today, as it, I believe in all dharmic systems, not just in Tantra, I see there is a certain degree of fall, a certain degree of corruption. Not corruption in the sense of monetary corruption, but corruption in the sense that lowering of the standards have happened by and large in every aspect of dharma. And that is also because the quality of people perhaps who are interested in these things are not that high caliber as it used to be in an earlier era. So all taken together, getting an Abhishek Diksha is not too difficult practically today. But on the other hand, the guru needs to judge if the person is capable of carrying on sadhana, if the person is genuinely interested in that field. It is just, somebody who is merely curious kind. I mean, speaking of, somebody asked a question about the Kinaram Sampradaya, right? Once I had seen this a couple of years ago. I had gone to Kamakhya and I was staying for about 10-15 days. I was there. Right next to where I was staying, there were 4 people from the Kinaram ashram, 4 gurus who had come. And the oldest, the senior-most guru was almost 90 years old. There was somebody who was about little younger. And then there was somebody who was younger than that. So they were all disciples, each one disciple. And the three gurus were there. They were all Indians. The third one was perhaps in his 40s. And then there were two young people who had come. So they were keen on taking initiation into certain kind of upasana related to the goddess. So they had brought those people, those three gurus, and that two novices. They had brought them to Kamakhya to give them an initiation into certain tantric practices. Now, what I observed very interestingly, I used to stay in one room. They used to stay. It was a very small, arrangement there because a lot of people come during Ambuvachi in Kamakhya in that time, like almost lakhs of people. They were staying right in the room next to me, and the two novices were staying together in another room. So, what the interesting thing that I found was that the senior most gurus, the second order and the third order gurus, would not speak directly to the novices. It's only their immediate guru who would speak to them. So one day I observed they were like sleeping at night. I think suddenly the guru, who's just immediate to them, comes, knocks on their room, and wakes them up and gives them full bucket full of clothes and says that now it is night, go and wash them and come. Everybody's clothes. Okay. In between their eating, suddenly they'll say, now go do this, do that. So whole point was, if you look at it from outside, it's as if there is some sort of a torture regime that was going on to them. I was, on the other hand, speaking to that senior most guru because he was sitting somewhere one day, and I just went up and we were just discussing things like that. And he was telling that generally that, when you enter this path, the way that sampradaya is to function, and some of the older sampradayas still perhaps function this way. They're not keen on taking people, so they'll put in 100 hurdles on your way, tell you why you should not enter this path. They'll make you do all sorts of stuff till the time your obedience to the guru is perfected. At any given point, you feel that no, I cannot do this. I am not meant to do all these things, jharu pocha business. Before even a mantra is given to you, they'll say, now please get out. So the idea is, it's a process of filtering. It's a process of filtering, and they make them do this. They will also give them some mantra, and they'll ask them to keep chanting for months or maybe even years. It depends. I don't know what is the duration of it depends on the guru. Until they're very sanguine that, okay, after you have passed through all that, that means you are 100% serious about the path. Then only they will go into the higher levels of Diksha. So, like this. But many other sampradayas today do not follow anything like that. If you are interested, then you go and speak to the guru, and they maybe one or two meetings, and they'll give you a Diksha. So that also happens.
How does one start looking for a guru?
See, generally, if you're looking for a guru, that is a very broad topic again. I'm saying specifically if you're looking for a tantric upasana, or generally maybe even for a general guru also, you don't wait for the guru, start some sadhana. That is allowed to be done without a diksha. And so don't go into direct, Bija mantras and things like that, but maybe Ashtattara namas or stuff, or maybe just take an upadesha from a senior upasaka. So upadesha, mantra upadesha and all can also be taken from people who are senior upasakas who may not be gurus. This is the concept of the uttara sadhaka in tantras, which are an upasaka who is of a high caliber, who is not a guru, but he can guide others. So you take some advice from them, you start doing some chanting and some sadhana, at least for 6 months to a year or something like that, and then meanwhile keep looking. It's not something that you will find it on day one. Keep looking, and perhaps you'll find somebody who suits your conception of what a guru must be and who can guide you, and who has, see, here's the other thing, it's very important. We blindly believe anybody who claims to be a guru. I personally feel that you must always test your guru very well. There is absolutely no harm in testing a guru. In fact, one of the tantras mentions this, that if your guru is incapable, if he is not, so guru has to know the shastras, guru has to have there are lakshanas of a guru. He must have attained to success, attained to siddhi of the process, and that will be reflected in the way he walks and talks. You don't have, he may not have to beat his own drum. It will be visible if you interact with a person who has attained siddhi, higher level siddhi, and not lower level siddhi. I'm talking about lower means some siddhi of spirits and all that nonsense. But I'm saying higher level siddhi, if somebody has attained, and you interact with that person for some period of time, don't be in a hurry. Spend few months, meet that person, see, etc., etc. You'll get a clear understanding that there is something about the individual which may be not, normal, which is a reflection of the process of of sadhana that he or she has gone through. And number two, it is important that the guru should respect the shastras. Why? Because shastras are binding on everybody. If you violate from the, what I've seen is the moment you step outside of the bound of the shastras, if not today, someday or the other, that specific act is going to come back and cause problems to you. That is why the shastras are so exceptional, because they have far sight encoded into it. The people who compose the shastras, the revelations that were given, they can see up to a distance which you, I, even the best upasaka cannot see. That is why the shastras are so very important, because they may see that if you make some change here, decades later, some problem is going to come like that. You cannot see that, foresee that, however good you might be. So that is the reason why almost all genuine sampradayas try to follow the basic fundamentals that have been given by the Shastras. You cannot invent a new path. You have to go through the path that is given. In between, there are certain leeways that are allowed. But for that, the Guru has to be competent enough, and he must have attained to a certain degree of proficiency. So before searching for a Guru, first is start doing some upasana on your own, at least, and be in no hurry. I mean, it's not like one day you'll find, just tomorrow or day after you can find. To spend 6 months to a year actually perfecting your sadhana to some degree, so that the process you do brings the Guru into your life.
How does one know that the mantra is working? And do we need to chant the mantra fast or slowly?
The mantra is working, as I said. First of all, you will see that you will look forward to the japa of the mantra. First thing. Number two is that there can be various experiences that relate to the mantra. Some of them will be internal experiences, a feeling of bliss, for example, a feeling of oneness with the mantra, a definite certain kind of depth in your meditation on the mantra. But when you're doing mantra sadhana japa, it is like the height of mantra sadhana is meditation on the mantra. The mantra becomes, your mind becomes filled with the mantra, and there is nothing else there. That state, if you attain, that means that your mantra is going very well. Your body and mind is, what you call it, gelling with the mantra properly. Plus, at the same time, you will find reactions that will happen around you. That is definite if the mantra is working. There are physical changes around you depending on the deity whom you are invoking. You'll see certain practical differences around you, small signs of the deity that will come. But more importantly, the two, even when I say signs, you have to also be careful, because careful in the sense that unless you are developed to a certain degree, you will misinterpret signs. Our mind gets too eager to believe that some magic is happening outside, and that is why we very easily misinterpret very normal occurrences. That is problematic. You have to, that only when you have attained to a higher state, that you will rightly know that this is the sign that is happening is correctly linked to the sadhana that you do. And because these are so complicated things, this correct judgment, that is why the importance of Guru is there. If you yourself are going to make the decision, it is very likely that you will make mistakes. Regarding signs outside, it depends on the caliber of the sadhana you are doing. So there are certain mantras of deities which, if you, certain caliber of mantras, mantra sadhana, if you do properly, there will be certain animals who may come to you, for example. There are in certain very, very high order sadhanas, and this is not for simple starters and beginners and all that. Even in the tantric scheme of things, it is at a higher order of Shakti when that is there. If you do those sadhanas, there are certain snakes may come to an individual who is doing that sadhana. They will not harm the individual. They'll come to the area where the sadhana is happening. They may even move around in that area. There will be not one trace of fear in that sadhana. Because the moment there is a trace of fear, immediately it will spoil the whole sadhana. But that is taken as an indication that the mantra has activated to a higher level. Then there are stages of tantric sadhana where which those sadhanas cannot be done at home. Though suppose you are doing that sadhana in a secluded setting, in a forest or something, foxes and jackals and things like that, they will come. And there are specific, we call bhog, specific balis, food items. Those have to be kept separate for them. And if they come and accept that offering that you have, then it is an indication that it is. So what exactly, it is an indication of the success of the process. But what exactly does it mean by an animal coming? It is the Shakti of the mantra works in a subtle way. It is not something physically visible. So what it does is it creates the deity. The deity takes possession of the animal and comes to you, because the deity may not directly appear in front of you, Your nervous system does not have the capacity to take that in the full power of the rate. So it possesses an animal that is suitable vehicle of that mantra Shakti. That animal comes to you, accepts something from you. The way that animal behaves with you and the way you behave with that animal will indicate what kind of um, what state you are in the upasana, etc. So this is, I'm talking very high advanced stage it happens, but these things happen. So there will be signs outside, there will be signs inside you also. This thing that I described, these animals coming, snakes coming, this cannot happen until you also have attained to a significant degree of Advaita Bhava with the mantra. You have to have oneness with the mantra. And that is not that simple. It's like you keep chanting, chanting, and then the mantra goes very deep within you. Then you will realize that. But all these are starts off at that point that, once you start a practice, how much do you look forward to doing it? Are you doing it as a punishment, or are you doing it because you really love doing it? When that feeling of love, that attraction for the process comes in, then you know that whatever sadhana you're doing, whatever mantra you're chanting is working for you. That's the first step.
Okay, and Rashiji, there's a lot of confusion about doing jap, of the mantra very fast or slowly, something like that.
Okay, fast is slowly is better, but slowly will not happen on day one. Slowly happens when you develop into a certain higher condition, and then the mantra itself will take you into a meditative state, and automatically the pace of mantra japa will reduce. The initial stages, just do it at the normal pace. No need to do too fast, no need to do too slow. But important to do is finish the counts. That is very important. Like you have to do one mala, then one mala only you finish it. No giving up in the middle. Like I did half and then suddenly felt like now I have to go. No, not like that. Do it in a disciplined manner, that the amount that you are set to do every day, or if you're doing a mantra purushar, a mantra anushtan, this much has to be done. So this much has to be done. It will inculcate a certain discipline in the mind that is very, very useful as you go higher in sadhana.